Hey everyone, Mr. Regan here, and today we're looking at breaking down our energy device research survey as we begin to dive into researching different devices and systems that are used in the real world to capture energy using the body's motion. Now, before we get into these articles and how we're going to use it to help our rescue team, we're going to be breaking down how we'll be selecting the energy devices to research in the next set of tasks, along with how to use your active reading skills when annotating and reading the articles. So, in the next set of tasks, you're going to be looking at some different devices and breaking down with your group which articles each person is going to be reading. If you are somebody who is absent or you are in a group that doesn't have any people, then you're going to be responsible for reading all four of the articles. So you would just put all of your name for all four, and then obviously record the names of each article below. Once each person has the article that they're going to read and knows which one they're responsible for, in the next test, you're going to then dive in and select which of the articles you're going to read. There are four articles. Article 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each one of those icons represents one of our four articles. As you read, you're going to be making your annotations, which we'll be going over here shortly, and then answering these three summary questions that you have about the article. Now, these are not about specific things that you've read about, but more specifically, big ideas that you've gotten as you read the article itself. Now, let's go ahead and talk about what our active reading should look like before we get to the actual summary questions at the end. So, as you know, active reading is when we read like a scientist, where we think carefully about what we're reading and pay attention to our understanding. We make notes and annotations. We look at and examine pictures and images to consider what they all mean, and we discuss what we read and confirm to improve our understanding. So when we dive into our articles, for example, this one is titled The Energy Capturing Backpack. There's a lot of pictures, there's a lot of things to annotate, and even videos here. If you notice, when you double click on this one, if you notice the directions here, will take you into a video that help break down the actual device itself and show you it in real world time. So make sure that you're going through and using all of the resources here as we go ahead and use our active reading skills. Now, let's talk about our active reading skills. These are something we've looked at. These are something that strong readers use, including scientists. And we know that active reading is when we focus on our reading and pay attention to our understanding and connect what we're learning to what we have read. Now, our annotations are evidence of that reading, of that paying attention, of that understanding and connection. So, when we annotate, we make annotations that ask questions, the what's, the why's, the how's. We ask questions about the pictures, the text, the titles, the labels, everything we see. We ask questions. We explain connections. So we connect things that we see in pictures to maybe things that we see in the text. We connect our life experiences, and we can even add to that and say things that we've learned in the past. So let's do that. Let's fix it. Things we've learned in the past. Last but not least, we identified difficult topics. So words, vocab, if there's any phrases or ideas, we identify the things that we don't quite understand or maybe need clarification on. And last but not least, we discuss what we read with our peers. For this activity, we'll be diving into some discussions and looking at better explaining your thinking and ideas, getting a perspective that you didn't think about, and making sense of that confusing stuff that we're a little unsure of. So, when we make our annotations, we have to then go into our Google Doc and record those questions, connections, and difficult topics. So, how do we do that? Well, we go through and we highlight using our highlight icon all of those different connections, questions, and difficult texts. We add comments to whatever we highlight, and then in the comment section, we actually add those questions, connections, and difficult words or ideas. So we always have that running log on the right side of our doc that we can look at and see through our highlighted sections. So let's go ahead and look at an example or set of examples for those questions, connections, difficult words, and ideas. So let's say we were reading our hand crank article and we had to record a question about what you're reading so we can come back to it later. And you read the section that when the generator turns, it converts kinetic energy to electrical energy which is then stored in the battery as potential energy. The potential stored energy in the battery can be used right away or saved for later. And as you're reading this, you're thinking to yourself, well, what would happen if the flashlight didn't have a battery to store the energy for later? Would that make the device work differently? And maybe that's a question we come back to later. Maybe that's a question that helps you better understand how this system works. And that might even be a question to help you create your own system down the road. So we ask those big questions that get us thinking about what we're reading to help make better connections. Another active reading strategy and annotation we make is difficult topics and text. So as you're reading, you come across words or groups of words or ideas that you don't understand, you highlight them and you ask those questions or identify things like, I don't understand this. So for example, maybe you're reading about there are a lot of different ways to release kinetic energy. Bouncing, stretching, compressing, and other forms of motion all involve kinetic energy. And you're looking at this and thinking, what do they mean by compressing? What does compressing mean? How does our body compress? And that idea can be something that we come back to in a discussion or a question that we get answered down the road. And finally, we have connections. Now, remember, we also ask questions, make connections, and identify difficult ideas, not only of the text, but also images. So maybe you're looking at this image here and you're noticing that our system is comprised of four major ideas, things like that. And as you're reading through, you're making a connection and you ask the question, how might needing to turn this crank, to turn the generator, to power the battery that can then turn on light, how might that interrupt the rescue workers as they do their job? Connecting to what we know about the rescue workers, connecting to the job that they do. This will be a problem if they are using their hands for their job and have to stop to charge their device. So now you're thinking and connecting to what we know about the rescue workers and thinking beyond just what is shown in this diagram here. So making those connections. So once we're done asking our questions, identifying our difficult texts and topics, and making those connections, we're then going to discuss. Our discussion is going to have three major parts. It's going to have a share part, a discussion part, and an analyze part. The share part is where you explain the reading to improve your ideas and what you read. You choose an interesting question or something you identified as a main idea, and you share all the big things that you thought were important and that you learned. After you're done sharing, and once everyone's done sharing, you then discuss those ideas with the people in your group. Whether it's discussing your ideas or other ideas, you share and discuss your annotations with the partner, and you show what you've learned about the information, and you learn about things and ideas from others. And once we're done discussing, we then analyze the important stuff. This is where you make sense out of the confusing stuff or the stuff that you don't understand. This is where you choose an interesting unanswered question to discuss with a group, so that we can then better explain our phenomena, or in this case, how to help our rescue workers. So, folks, that's how we go about making our annotations that then will end in a discussion. So go ahead and take a minute. Go ahead and go back to your energy device research survey here and ask yourself, do we understand how to select our energy device to research in the next set of tasks? So that was this task and this task. And do we understand how to use your active reading skills when annotating and reading the article? Go ahead and place your X where you feel you fall. You understand both of those, you understand one of those, you're struggling with both of them. And reach out if you put your X in yellow or red so you feel ready to begin annotating our articles. That's all I got. If you have any questions, reach out. Otherwise, good luck.